The rain tapped against the concrete as Daniel stepped out of the small grocery store in Georgia, his hoodie soaked and hands full of plastic bags. He didn't notice the world around him. Not the puddles, not the chill, only the echo of his own thoughts. 2 years had passed since cancer took his wife, and it hadn't gotten easier. He was breathing, yes, but not living. He moved slowly toward his truck, head down, until he heard a voice, small, shaky, and close. "Sir?" He turned, expecting someone asking for spare change, but it wasn't that. Standing under the edge of the awning was a little black girl, 6, maybe 7. Her oversized raincoat hung from her shoulders like it didn't belong. One shoe was untied, and she held a stuffed bunny so worn its ear was barely hanging on. Her eyes were wide, fixed on his face, trembling but determined. "Please, will you marry my mom?" she said. He blinked. She swallowed hard. "She's all I have left." The words didn't make sense at first. They just floated in the space between them, too big, too raw, too real. He didn't laugh. He didn't speak. He just stared at her as a storm broke open inside him, louder than the rain. Her voice wasn't begging. It was full of something deeper, fear, courage, the kind of grown-up sadness no child should ever carry. She didn't look away. Daniel felt something shift. A crack inside him he thought was sealed. He looked down at her again, really looked, and saw what the world probably missed. A child who'd already learned that life doesn't wait for help. He didn't know her story. He didn't even know her name. But something about the way she stood there in the rain, asking for a miracle with soaked shoes and a shaking voice, made him take one step closer. And she reached out, took his hand, like she already knew he'd say yes. He didn't ask questions, he just followed her. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle as she led him down the sidewalk, her tiny boots splashing through puddles. The town around them faded. No honking cars, no curious eyes, just quiet streets and damp air. Daniel had no idea where they were going, but somehow he trusted her. They walked past shuttered shops, broken fences, and houses with chipped paint. An old man sitting on his porch didn't even glance up. 2 teenagers on bikes passed them and stared, but said nothing. Not a single person asked what a little black girl was doing, walking hand in hand with a strange white man. That silence? It said everything. She turned into a narrow alley beside a faded laundromat and came out the other side into a mobile home park. Rusted swings, cracked windows, laundry hanging under cloudy skies. Finally, they reached a trailer with a sagging porch and a screen door that barely clung to its hinges. She let go of his hand and climbed the wooden steps without a word. The door opened. A woman stood in the doorway, her hair pulled into a tired bun, apron dusted with flour, face pale from too many skipped meals and not enough sleep. She froze when she saw Daniel. The little girl moved behind him and whispered, "That's my mom." The woman's eyes darted from Daniel to her daughter, then back. I'm so sorry," she stammered. "She says strange things sometimes. I hope she didn't scare you." Her voice was soft, embarrassed, used to apologizing for things that weren't her fault. Daniel shook his head. "She didn't scare me." He didn't know why he said it, but he meant every word. She stepped aside and let him in, like she didn't have the strength to argue. The trailer was small. One room served as kitchen, living, and dining all in one. The walls were patched with tape, and a space heater hummed in the corner. A pot simmered on the stove, filling the air with the scent of something plain but warm. There were no decorations, just survival. Daniel sat awkwardly at the edge of the couch. The little girl climbed up beside him and clutched her bunny, watching her mom. "I'm Rachel," the woman said after a moment, "and that's Nia." Daniel nodded. "Daniel?" She gave a faint smile, then quickly turned away to stir the pot. "I didn't mean for her to stop you like that. She misses her father. He passed last year." Daniel looked over at Nia, who was tracing circles on the fabric of the couch with her finger. "Cancer," Rachel added. "He served in the army. 3 tours. Came back sick. But we didn't know how bad." There was a pause. Not heavy, just honest. "I work over at Donna's Diner," she continued. 6 days a week. Nia waits at the neighbors after school until I get off. Most days." Her voice was steady, but there was tiredness in her bones, a kind of weariness Daniel knew too well. She finally turned around. "It's not easy out here," she said. "Folks don't really see us. Not unless we're in the way." She didn't say, "because we're black." She didn't have to. Daniel saw it. In the broken mailboxes, the cracked sidewalks, the way the grocery store clerk had watched her when she walked in earlier but never said hello. Rachel shrugged. "But we manage." He could see she wasn't asking for pity. She wasn't asking for anything at all. That, somehow, made it hit harder. He didn't plan to go back. But 3 days later, he walked into Donna's Diner and saw her again. Rachel, behind the counter, balancing coffee pots and tired smiles. Her apron was the same. So was the exhaustion behind her eyes. He didn't say much, just ordered black coffee and sat in the corner booth by the window. That became his spot. Once a week at first, then twice. Always the same booth, always the same waitress. He didn't go for the food. He went for something he couldn't name. Sometimes Nia came by after school and sat at the booth with him while her mom finished her shift. He started bringing little things: a book of bedtime stories, a box of crayons, a ribbon for her stuffed bunny. One day, Nia handed him a folded napkin. He opened it slowly. Inside was a drawing: 3 stick figures holding hands under a crooked rainbow. One of them had his beard. One wore an apron. One had pigtails and a bunny. He stared at it for a long time. "She said, 'That's us,'" Rachel said, watching from behind the counter. "Her family." Daniel didn't know what to say, but something settled in his chest. Something warm and unfamiliar. The kind of feeling that made you stop running. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything cracked. Rachel had just stepped outside the diner after her shift, apron still on, holding a small paper bag of leftovers. She waved at Daniel, who was across the street about to open his truck. Then she collapsed. The bag hit the sidewalk. So did she. Daniel ran. "Rachel!" People stared, but didn't move. No one called 911. Not until he shouted at the top of his lungs. It took the ambulance 12 minutes to arrive. By the time they loaded her in, her lips were pale. Her hands were cold. Daniel sat in the emergency room waiting area, arms wrapped around Nia, who hadn't said a word since. Her head rested on his chest. Her bunny was missing, but she hadn't noticed. When the doctor finally came out, he didn't look surprised, just tired. "She's stable," he said, but her body gave out. Malnutrition, exhaustion, high blood pressure. She's been pushing herself too far for too long. Daniel nodded slowly, then asked, "How didn't anyone see it coming?" The doctor sighed. "Single moms, especially black women, they don't get seen until they collapse." The words stung. not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Rachel had smiled through her pain, worked through her hunger, kept going when her legs were already giving out. And no one, not the diner owner, not the neighbors, not even Daniel, had stopped to ask how she was holding up. He looked down at Nia. "She's strong," he whispered. Nia didn't answer, but she squeezed his hand. The hospital room was quiet. Machines beeped softly beside Rachel's bed. Her face looked peaceful for once, even with the tubes and wires, like the weight she'd carried for years had finally been set down, just for a moment. Daniel sat beside her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight. Nia slept curled up in the chair across from him, her head leaning against the armrest, one shoe off, her bunny finally found and resting on her lap. He hadn't planned to stay the night, but when the nurse brought a blanket and didn't say a word, he knew he wasn't going anywhere. He looked at Rachel again. He didn't know how to say what he felt. He never had the words, but his chest felt like it had been cracked open. He reached for her hand. "I didn't come here to stay," he whispered, "but somehow you made me feel like I already belonged." Her hand didn't move, but her fingers, faintly, curled around his. And that was enough. The sun warmed the park, lighting the grass like gold. Children laughed in the distance. Birds danced through trees that swayed in a soft breeze. Rachel stood beneath a willow tree in a simple white dress. No makeup, no jewelry, just her. Her cheeks held color again. Her eyes looked steady, not tired. There was still pain behind them. But now, there was also light. Nia ran barefoot in the grass, flower petals in her hands, tossing them into the air like confetti. Her laugh rang out, free and unfiltered, echoing through the quiet. Daniel stood beside them, nervous but calm. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ring. Nothing flashy, just real. He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost," he said gently. "A reason to come home. A reason to stay." Rachel didn't cry. She just smiled. The kind of smile that says yes without needing the word. Nia ran over and threw her arms around both of them, squealing with joy. The three of them stood there, wrapped in each other, under a sky that finally looked clear. No music, no guests, no ceremony. Just a family. Real, quiet, whole. And sometimes that's more than enough.